Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I've got Lisa McCracken with the NIC organization. I've got such a great list of questions. This is going to be, she's always one of my very favorite guests because she's one of the smartest people I know and she does research, and this is going to be a great conversation. But before we get into it, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So, Lisa, before I actually get to my questions, we've got to start with just a brief introduction of who you are, who NIC is, and while we're actually getting there, before I really get to the meat, talk to me a little bit about the upcoming spring conference. What's going to be talked about? What are you excited about?
Okay, that was like 5 questions in one, but I'll get to it quick. It's because I know we got a lot to talk about. Okay, so I'm Lisa McCracken. I'm the head of research and analytics with NIC. And quick, for those of you who don't know who NIC is, we are the National Investment Center for Seniors Housing Care. We are a not-for-profit organization. We are basically research, data, analytics, thought leadership. Our mission is around advancing access and choice. So our stakeholders are capital operators, developers, and we're really meant to provide information, like I said, thought leadership and research to advance the field across a number of different areas and topics. Yes, we've got a very big conference coming up. We've got 2 big conferences, our fall and our spring conference, a smaller growth conference in May, but we have our spring conference coming up March 30th through April 1st in exciting Nashville. It's our first time in Nashville. So that's a new city for us. And we're looking at, so far already, record registration. A little over 2,000 people already registered, and super excited about that. And, you know, a lot of great sessions. We're going to open up with Mark Zandi from Moody's, giving us the lowdown on the economy and what's happening on that front. We've got a gentleman from CMS, the Chief Strategy Officer from the Center for Innovation, Gary Bacher. We've got a great session led by Mark Parkinson, former CEO of ACA, and the leaders on the skilled nursing front. We're talking about workforce and labor. That's a hot topic. We're talking about value-based care, active adults, quite a few other key topics, Steve, but it's a jam-packed, not only education sessions, but we know there's a lot of networking, deal making that happens, and there's many people that go there and don't ever step foot in the session space, and so there's a lot of activity happening right now in our sector, and there's a lot of deal making and transaction activity that'll be happening in Nashville that week.
So, if there's one session that they shouldn't miss, what is that?
Gosh, that's really hard. It's like picking among your favorite children. Oh my gosh. So, okay, here's what I'm going to say, because it's not, it's been really special that we have, I would say, CMS, our sector on the radar of CMS. So the fact that we have Gary Bacher coming to our conference to participate in a session on Tuesday morning, that is pretty awesome. So the fact that senior housing is really, I think, gotten the attention of CMS as a really valuable spoke of the wheel in terms of the macro ecosystem of being a really valuable asset to caring for older adults, I think is a big deal. So we'd love for people to show up Tuesday morning and really hear what he has to say. And I think that's a big one that we're pretty excited about. So that would be my one, but that was really hard to even just pick that one.
Yeah, I always feel badly when I talk to people and say, oh, no, I'm not going to any sessions. And I get it. I see a lot of people there. I like to do it, but there's so much meat in the sessions that you really do miss out if you don't do that. So you're basically, your job is to think about things, right? And to explore and say, what if, and what does this mean? What are the things you're sort of thinking about right now and passionate about and curious about?
So It's about thinking about things, but I'll tell you, I want to twist that a little bit, and then I'm going to answer your question. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about and really tracking, but also it's forcing us to think about the activities that we do, Steve, as well, is impact. So, we're curious by nature. I think our team and we should be like, I wonder, if we ran these numbers, what that would be, and so we're often curious a lot about different things, and we want to provide information and so forth. But what are some really interesting research projects and things that we can do that can have some real significant impact on the industry and really move the needle in some pretty serious ways? So, and sometimes those are really big research projects. We've done a number of bigger sponsored research projects in partnership with groups like NORC at the University of Chicago, Harvard Joint Center, the Forgotten Middle research that we've done. We're hoping to update some of that in the not too distant future. We're working on some affordability stuff. That's a big deal to us. And we're always going to do things like case studies and fact sheets and FAQs and how to advance on value-based care and things of that nature. But, you and I were talking, we did a really big study on penetration rates, and that led to so many discussions. Initially it started off with, why do some markets have significant penetration rates and adoption of assisted living where others don't? And it's not a simple, it's not a simple answer. It's not just, okay, these markets have a lot of seniors and the ability to pay. It's so much more than that. It's the culture, it's the psychology of it. It is policy. It's, the workforce environment and so forth. So it brought up some very interesting conversations and so forth. So there's a lot on that front, that we are excited about and working on. We are really trying to advance the ball, on the value-based care. And sometimes that, I think people get really intimidated by that when you say value-based care. But really what it is it's, a different way of coordinating the overall care and well-being older adults. And so, we brought on a team member last summer from the gentleman that worked at CMS, and really trying to break that down in some meaningful chunks and be a bridge between what I say, that world, the payer world, again, the CMS ecosystem and so forth, and our sector. So those are things that we're really trying to, I think, move the needle on and bring some really robust research behind. So those are some big things that we're working on and have released some research on recently. And we've got some other things on the horizon that I can't talk about just yet, Steve. But I know that's a little teaser. We'll talk again maybe in a month or so when I can share a little bit more publicly.
So you're killing me here. I've made a list of like 6 more things I want to ask you about, and we're not going to get to. We're already almost a third of the way through our time. I have to ask this: what does move the needle mean to you? What makes the industry better as you look at it? You go back, you sit back and you look at the last 12 months and you say, we really made the industry better. What does that mean to you?
Better is, I would say, learning from past mistakes. That would be one. Definitely serving more seniors. That affordability piece, I think, is one of the things that definitely keeps us up at night. And it's not just, there's the real affordability, and then there is a perception of affordability. And some of that is not just because we've said, we just want to serve maybe a more affluent base. It's the government's not paying for assisted living. So that's the reality. It's a private pay, that we're a function of what our system is. Construction development isn't getting any cheaper. It's not getting cheaper to pay people. So there are reasons why. So nobody's pointing fingers, but it's, you know, when you look at the bricks and mortar of what we do, you know, I'm excluding some of the services side of things. You know, we serve a narrow market. So when you think about the slice of the pie, and so we think so much about the boomers, we serve a narrow market. And then I do think about too what we offer, you know, and you know, we talk a lot too about the preferences and the boomers and the boomer mindset, and even Gen X. I'm Gen X. Everybody forgets about Gen X. I joke that we're the other forgotten middle. Yeah. People go from baby boomers to the millennials, and like then we even get called Boom X. Like, okay, well, we just get skipped over. But you know, it's just thinking differently. I think for us to really even expand our footprint, we're going to even need to just, I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater and necessarily blow up existing what we have. We're just going to need to think differently to even expand our reach. And it's not just about being relevant for the next generation. Okay, it's being relevant for the next generation, but how can we also expand to a broader audience? And so I think we've got to think differently. And I think there's receptivity to that. The final thing I'll say, and I'll stop talking here because I know you're going to have more questions, is I think that conversation is different if you're on like that needs-based side of things. If you need skilled nursing, if you need memory care support, that's a different conversation than if we're talking on the independent living side, active adult, where that's a much more want-based type of what I'll call product. Where we have the ability to refine and define that in very different ways than what it looks like today. To me, that's exciting. And I think the future has the potential to look incredibly different.
So we're not going to be able to do this today, but I want to do another whole session with you where we do a debate. Because I have a lot of non-traditional views. So I think all senior, I'll give you just a couple of examples. I think that all senior living is need-based, even independent living. You might argue the Active 55, the Margaritaville, Sun City villages is not need-driven, but I think it's all need-driven. And I think we're delusional when we talk about it as mostly a lifestyle product.
Well, our Newark research affirmed that.
Okay,
that.
So let me give you my other one. There are a couple more, but I'll give you one more. The other one that I strongly disagree with the industry is I don't think we have a staffing problem. I don't think we have a staffing shortage at all. I think we have a culture problem. There are a few operators, Goodwin Houses being the most prominent example, where they have plenty of applicants because they have created a culture where people love coming to work every day. But we don't have time to do that. Okay, I want to get into.
So at our conference, I'm moderating a session with Ron Hetrick. Have you seen him speak? He's spoken at some other conferences. He's a labor economist. So he's on Tuesday afternoon. You need to come to that session. So I was going to pick that as my favorite, but I'm moderating that session. I thought that might be bad to pick that session. But so there are some numbers issues on the workforce front, but could we be the winner in that if we're the best place to work? You know, I think so. So there's some points to what you're saying on the culture front. That's another. We could spend all day talking about that.
I think as long as people are working at McDonald's, Starbucks, and Taco Bell, those are people who would be happier working for us when we create the right and go culture. But let's get in. I want to get into penetration rates and occupancy. A month or so, I got a press release about highest occupancy ever, and the thing I found myself wondering is, and I'm trying to see if I can frame this in a way that is easy to understand. The question really is why is occupancy going up? Is it strictly a demographic phenomena because my boomer generation is getting older and has more needs? Or have we really moved the needle in terms of how people perceive senior living? So we know occupancy is going up because of demographics for sure and the lack of building. But are people actually seeing it better or differently, or is it just we're lucky to have a bunch of us getting older?
How do you measure, like why people move in? So it's going up in both on independent living and assisted living. Now, to your point, there isn't often an element of need in independent living. Now, it varies across the community in terms of, you and I have both been seen independent living. It looks a little assisted living like others where independent living is a very, very young, vibrant type of community. So, we're seeing the occupancy go up on both of those sides of things. And when the highest occupancies and are on the entry fee life plan and CCRC communities. And those tend to have some of the youngest ages and so forth. But so, occupancies you can say are going up, a number of reasons. Yeah, demographics. We're also seeing, very low inventory growth. So there's not a whole lot new coming on the market. So it's not like you got a whole lot of inventory that's in fill up. So, so there's a math element in that. But is there an increase in consumer enthusiasm for the product? How do you measure that? I don't know. I think the real interesting rubber hitting the road is going to be once that development picks up and what we start to see on the occupancy side of things, and how does that hold up in terms of the demand side of things. So we're definitely seeing the need and the absorption hang in there and seeing some of the record highs and so forth. But I don't have the exact answer for that. I know what you're getting at. I think we don't know yet. I mean, because when you look at the average age, this is the first year the boomers are hitting 80.
Right.
Still for the most part, we're 80 plus, 85 plus, and on average, a lot of our typical senior housing resident, certainly on the assisted living front and so forth. I think 5 years from now, it'll be an interesting time to start to even, start to think about some of that too. But it's interesting to think about. I think if we start to see some differences on the independent living side, the need is definitely more reflected on the assisted living, and then obviously skilled nursing. If we start to see some changes on independent living, which again, you could say is need-based, but it's less so, that would show is there a faltering in terms of the product from a consumer standpoint. And then you could say, well, are they moving into active adult instead? That penetration rate's so low though, Steve, that's less than 1%. So I don't, and I'm not sure that that's an either or. I don't think that that's, I don't think today's active adult is yesterday's independent living. I think they're two different products for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. We don't tend to categorize Margaritaville or the Village or Sun City as senior living, and I kind of think they ought to fall in in that broad bucket because again, they're targeting this a younger cohort of the senior living bucket, right?
Yeah, and I will tell you those that they are for purchase. They're obviously not a rental product, and they're a younger individual and a lot of couples. And I will tell you those communities and master plan communities and developments, they know their customer very, very well. They have a very clear profile of who their customer is. And so, it's I would say that's a very different segment than our typical senior housing, which is generally an older, a little more frail population than the Margaritavilles and the 55 plus for purchase housing developments.
So you said something really interesting just now that I want to dig into a little bit. So you talk about how they know their customer very, very well. That sort of implies we as senior living providers, operators, developers are not that good at that. Is that, I want to start by asking, sort of clarifying whether you would believe that's true or not.
No, well, so they are selling, it's interesting. They're selling a very, very specific, when you look at a Margaritaville, they are selling to a very, very specific customer and a profile. It's this psychographic profile that they are going after. And that's very different, I think, than what a typical senior housing. I think I had this conversation recently with someone about our industry's use of sort of some of those psychographic elements versus we hear a lot of age and income qualified. And this gets to some of the elements of the penetration rate stuff. And actually, that was one of the things that we heard of feedback on the penetration rate report, where sometimes I think on the development side, the capital side, you hear a lot again on the age income. And a lot of the operators were like, this is what we've been saying for years. It's very multifaceted and so forth. So I think sometimes we don't spend enough time on knowing the customer in depth and so forth. Ryan Marshall, I don't know if he from Pulte Homes, when he spoke in the fall at our conference, like they know their customer incredibly well. And their 55 plus segment, they spent an incredible amount of time studying that market and that segment and have it down very, very well. And now they've got a massive, massive national footprint to their developments, which has a scale that most of our senior housing doesn't have. So,
that was an amazing talk. I'll tell you the thing that they talked about doing that just resonates with me and rattles through my head is how they go into a warehouse and they basically build housing using, sort of balsa wood and paper to recreate models. And then they walk people through them and say, what do you think? And I keep thinking, man, what if we actually did that with senior living? Because I will tell you, one of the things I hear over and over again when I talk to people who are developing senior living communities is they never build enough big units. That no matter how many big units they build, those are always the units that fill up first, and they always wish they had more. And I think they're the most profitable.
Yeah, and actually, so we just did a webinar on February 11th on this, and it was around growth, and the one panelist from Greystone Communities that does a lot of development, particularly on the life plan community front, shared some statistics around how the square footage, particularly in the independent living unit side of things, has gone up over the years. And it's what's in demand. And we know on the occupancy side of things, it's the studios that have the lowest occupancy nationally. And we've had that conversation around, where will we hit this natural ceiling? Even if we could be 100% occupied, where will we not be? Because there's just this inventory of stuff that people don't necessarily want. Now, some people say that we're just selling that to the wrong people, and then that comes up to the middle market conversation. Is that a viable product for a middle market, customer, the studios and so forth? But without a doubt, there's great demand for the larger units, and they have gotten larger over the years. And but it feels like it wasn't that long ago that we were building studios, but now they're out of favor with the customer.
I toured a couple of weeks ago. I toured a new CCRC in Southern California, Wisteria, that it's not open yet. It'll be another 6 months. But they've got units that are 2,500 square feet. And I've been in a number of other CCRCs where, that's bigger than my house. And typically it's for two people, but people can afford it. They want the space. They've got stuff. And of course, it's sort of, if you're a middle market person, or if you sort of have a heart for people who are middle income, low income, you sort of cringe about that because it seems like it's going in the wrong direction. Yeah, I want to just sort of shift for a second. One of the things I saw in one of your NIC emails was that you've done a bankruptcy report. What's happening in bankruptcy? I just love to hear kind of a 2 minute sort of riff on why you did that. Yeah. And I assume the bankruptcies are going down. Is that not true?
Well, so here's why we did that, Steve, because every time there's a bankruptcy, we get all the outreach from the media. Oh, are they going up? Are they going down? And particularly coming out of COVID, there was a lot of, are they, coming out of COVID, or have they gone up and so forth. So first of all, we wanted a report that was just specific to our sector. We wanted some longitudinal data. So, because a lot of the bankruptcy reports might have some senior living data, but it's embedded in other things or whatever. Or it's like some point in time data, and it's really not telling the full picture. So Gibbons and Advisors, they've been producing bankruptcy reports for the healthcare sector for a number of years. And I'll tell you, it's a lot to track. And so we thought, can we partner up with them to create a specific report just for the senior living sector? So we did that. And yes, we're going to release it twice a year. We just released the first one this past week. And it goes data, actually, we started from 2019 through 2025. And then we're going to be adding on, the next one will come out in August. So it'll be as of the end of June. And what it shows is, actually, we did have a little spike in the beginning of 2025, but then it slowed down through the end of 25. But if you average out across the years, 2025 wasn't any different than every other year. So really they haven't gone up post-COVID. 2019 looks pretty similar. We averaged like 13 to anywhere from 10 to 15 a year. So like around a dozen a year. And that really hasn't changed. So when you look at all healthcare sectors, senior living and pharmaceuticals are the top within those. Now, but overall, do we have a big, massive problem? No. When you look at dollar amounts, the big dollar amounts are often the life plan community CCRCs. They're more heavily leveraged. A lot of them are tax exempt, which is a heavily leveraged group. We've had some biggies. Genesis was a big one, obviously, in the past year. And those get the big headlines. So we just wanted to be able to have some historical figures to be able to normalize and say, is it increasing? Is it decreasing? So actually, no, really the past few years have been pretty relatively normal from what that were even pre-COVID. So, and actually they're pretty, it's like a third CCRCs, a third SNF, and a third senior housing. So they're pretty evenly distributed among the core property types. So we thought that was really helpful. It gives us the facts to be able to respond when the headlines hit when you get a big bankruptcy. So that was it. We just want to have the facts.
Okay, so I want to give you my last question. I've been waiting all.
Oh, this is the big one?
The big one. I think this will be fun for you. I love it. I hope you love it as much as I do. So we're Friday here. You go have this nice weekend. Sunday night, you crawl into bed, started anticipating the next morning, except that when you wake up on Monday morning, you're not Lisa McCracken, head of research at NIC. You are the CEO of a well-funded senior living organization. And your mandate is to go out and build something amazing, something wonderful, using everything you know, because you have more data and more understanding. So here's my question. What would you build and where would you build it?
God, and you didn't even give me a heads up on that one.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
We've got a minute left to two. Okay.
We can go over a little bit here.
Yeah. So I will tell you, it wouldn't be all bricks and mortar. So I might build what I would call sort of I would call a hub. And I don't want to dilute it and call it a community center, but it would be maybe a community, but also that is part of a bigger ecosystem, because I think we're selling ourselves short to think that the only time that we can have influence or play a role on the longevity and continuum of aging is it's at this narrow spot where you come and live and call our, four walls home. I think there's an opportunity to impact the longevity cycle way before that. And I mean, this prevention and wellness is much bigger than that. So I don't know what that looks like. And it would be probably in partnership with some other groups and big names that are outside of our bubble. So Steve, if I had a lot of money too, it wouldn't be just even within our bubble. It would probably be with some thinkers outside of our space too. I'd want to just think differently and have others be there with me, and use some different names and labels, and probably blow it up. So if money's not an issue, that would help with that.
Well, and what's interesting to me is I love this thinking so much. I've been thinking a lot about, so in Australia they talk about retirement villages. That's just sort of their industry term, and I like this idea of a village, and I this idea of somehow can you create something that would have not only older people, but it would have wealthier people, not so wealthy, your workforce, which means you'd also have kids, and that there would be this community. Because I think, again, I think that we don't talk enough about the number one value for senior living is actually not the care. It's really the human connection and being able to talk for people to solve the problem of loneliness. And as we get older, our circles mostly narrow. And so how do we do that? And so this is great. So now you have notice. This question is going to come back when we do our call before the fall conference, and you will have had 6 months or so, 5 months to think about it.
Well, I might end up having like 5 different concepts in my head. So I'll propose a different one each time. How about that?
Fantastic. One more question I have for you before I go. Again, it's just sort of, it popped up as you were talking. Does weather have any impact on penetration rates?
No, because actually Minneapolis is the most penetrated assisted living market in the country, and Miami is the lowest. So if you're assuming warmer is better and colder is worse, opposite. At least
no. So I would assume that warmer would make lower penetration rates because people are more likely to stay home.
Yeah, well, so on the assisted living front, the 2 highest markets are Minneapolis and Portland, Oregon. The 2 lowest are Las Vegas and Miami, but for totally different. All 4 of them are for different reasons. Yeah. So, but they all vary. But it doesn't follow sort of the Sun Belt and there's not a normal pattern on that front.
Cool. Well, Lisa, we are out of time. I could do this another hour. This has been great fun. Thank you for indulging me with all my questions.
You're welcome. And
I look forward to seeing you in Nashville in a few weeks. And I actually have one more question about Nashville. Can you help me with a hotel room there? I'm struggling.
Did you wait too long? Is that the
problem? I waited too long.
So that's what we tell people. Like, you got to register right away and get that hotel room. And then I tell people, even if you have to cancel, like, don't cancel. But if you have to, then at least, get the room. So I know, but the good thing is about Nashville, there is a lot of hotels. Even within very close proximity to the Omni right there. So there's a lot of options. So get in a couple steps. Nashville's always good weather. So it'll be good.
Good. Lisa, again, thank you very much. Jada, thank you for producing behind the scenes. And I hope you all have an amazing weekend. I know that for a lot of us coming into March, a very busy conference season. So I'm hoping to see a bunch of you there, do some video interviews with you. And thank you for just having a heart to change the world.
Good to see you, Steve. We'll see you in Nashville.